2 suitcases, life in the backpack, new destination, full tank and a roadmap. My DJ, my best friend by my side, windows rolled down as I put the car in drive.
I don't know where we'll go, just know that we've got miles. We've got miles and miles to go.
Hi, I'm Dee Perry, and I'm joined by my co-host, Aaron Spears. Hey, Aaron.
Hello, Dee.
And this is another edition of CIFF Speaks, the official podcast of the Cleveland International Film Festival. And we're very pleased today to be joined by one of the filmmakers whose films is part of the new CIFF Streams, CIFF44 Streams, and that is Brad Rothschild, who is the director and co-producer of They Ain't Ready For Me. Brad, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be part of the festival this year.
Well, let's start with a brief introduction to your film. How would you describe it to a film festival audience? What do they need to know about They Ain't Ready For Me?
They Ain't Ready For Me is the story of Tamar Manasseh, a 42-year-old African-American rabbinical student from Chicago who is leading the fight against gun violence on the South Side.
And how did you find out about Tamar and what she was doing?
I think it was October of 2016, I read an article online about her. The headline of the article was, Black rabbinical student leads Chicago push against gun violence.
Huh.
And just from that, I was immediately sucked into this interview with this woman who is astounding. And as I read this piece, I thought to myself, wow, I really need to make a movie about this woman.
So you knew about her religious background before you went into it. Did that make the story more interesting for you?
Oh, totally. I was really compelled by the fact that here we have this woman who lives in the South Side of Chicago, is African American, and is Jewish and studying to be a rabbi. In the article, Tamar talks about how she credits her Judaism for her activism.
And one of the things she did was create an organization called Mothers and Men Against Senseless Killings, or MASK. And a large chunk of the film chronicles Tamar and her volunteers holding down the corner of Stewart Avenue and 75th Street in Chicago. I'm curious what you observed as you were in the process of filming on a day-to-day basis.
So every day when we would go out there to film, we got into a rhythm pretty quickly. And I actually should say that I witnessed Tamar's rhythm. And basically every day she shows up, she unpacks whatever she brought with her from home and gets the supplies out of a neighbor's house and sets up on the corner. And she sets up her chairs and she sets up the food and whatever games she brought for the day for kids to play with. And she always, turns on her music. And basically she just hangs out there, and anybody who wanders by is more than welcome to stop in and chat and hang out and just get to know other people in your neighborhood and just have a good time. That's really, so what I saw there were just regular everyday people in the summer who, just want something to do.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the motivation. The reason she went to that corner and started this whole program was what?
Well, in 2005, there was a woman named Lucille Barnes who was shot on that block, on that corner. And she was trying to break up a fight that kids were having, and somebody drove by and shot her. And at the time, people said, oh, she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And when Tamar heard about that, she got really upset because she thought to herself, well, how can you say this person is in the wrong place at the wrong time? She is a mother in her own neighborhood doing what mothers do, which is break up fights between kids. So she wasn't in the wrong place at the wrong time. She's the victim of a bad set of circumstances. And Tamar, when she read about this woman, she thought, well, this could have been me. And that's what made her decide to stay on that corner. And that's where she goes back every day from the first day of summer vacation until the day the kids go back to school. That's where she is.
So, how frequently were you filming? And because as I was watching, I was curious about where you were set up, how you were set up, how mobile you were, and all of those technical things.
So I live in New York City, and one of the challenges for me in making this film is that I needed to go back and forth to Chicago, and I went back every couple of weeks, and I would stay there for a few days each time, and that's how we ended up filming, and I consciously wanted to keep a small footprint there. I'm not the type of filmmaker who wants to interrupt daily life. I want to observe daily life. So the smaller crew that I can have, the happier I'll be, because I don't want look anybody who sees a camera crew is going to act differently no matter
Mm,
what. People just act differently when they're in front of a camera. But my goal is to try to be as unobtrusive as possible. So really, our footprint on that corner was me and the cameraman. And the
mm.
cameraman also did his own sound. I want to call out the cameraman by name, Dan Coleman, who did a fantastic job. We also had a second camera person named Tabby Kohler for the days when Dan wasn't there. But really, that's all it was. It was just the two of us trying to stay out of people's way and trying to just document what we saw.
Hey, Brad, I had a quick question kind of tied directly into that with the idea of people act differently when the camera is on.
Yeah,
There's a really, really amazing scene where Tamara and her group, I don't know, it's not really confront, but there's a police scene.
yeah.
And they had like the paddy wagon there when they said these kids were stealing water. And then there's like 4 and 6-year-olds coming out of this cage, as Tamara points out in the film. Did you notice, was there like a change in any sort of like a police or authority behavior with the cameras around that was different from when it was just Tamara and her crew around?
No, that's a really interesting question because really we didn't see the police all that much. And yeah, you mentioned that scene where the police do pull up in that paddy wagon, but we stayed quite a distance from where that was unfolding. Most of the shots in that scene are a little bit further out because
Mm-hmm.
we didn't want to get too close to what was going on. Not that the police would have any issue with us filming, because as you know, it's legal to film the police.
Right.
But we didn't see a lot of cops there. They would drive by. Obviously, it's a very heavily policed area, but they didn't interact a lot with Tamar or the other masked volunteers. Maybe there's one police officer in the beginning of the film who was hanging out, which was essentially the first day that people were out on the block that year. And he was awesome. He was friendly. He was talking with
Yeah.
people. He was really, he flew in the face of what you think is, the typical quote unquote, Chicago police officer. And after he left, or after we finished shooting that day, I was talking about it with Tamar, and she looked at me and she said, "He'll never come back here."
Hmm.
And she was right. He never came back.
And I wondered about that aspect too of official permission, so to speak, because Tamara and her group kept changing things on that corner, and it seemed like they were just taking the initiative, and no one was standing in their way to do that.
Yeah, you mean the physical changes to the
Right.
block. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
they own that lot now.
Hmm.
So they were able to make those changes that you see and make it more hospitable for kids to come and hang out and play. They had been across the street for a while, literally on the corner, like on a sidewalk. But when they were offered to buy that lot, they jumped at it because they needed more space to do what they were doing.
And Tamar herself, she just seems like a real force of nature and a natural leader. I was curious what it was like to work with her.
You hit the nail on the head. She is a force of nature. It was one of the greatest experiences of my life to get to know Tamar and for her to allow me to film her. She and I have become really close friends since making this film, or over the course of making this film. She's exactly what you see on the screen. That's who she is. There is no Tamar at home with her family is a different character than Tamar on the corner. What you see with her is what you get all the time. And she doesn't eat, she doesn't sleep. I don't know what powers her, but she has power that nobody else seems to have.
Wow.
And, one of the things that I learned really early on when I was filming is if there's an opportunity to go and eat something, you should go and eat, because Tamar is not going to eat. So, so some days she will and some days she won't, and you don't know which day it is until you're in it. So if you can grab something while you're shooting, then you have to take that. You have to take that opportunity when it comes.
That's a really interesting point, because it hadn't occurred till you just said about the food, but there's so much food in the movie because it's a great gathering tool for everybody in the neighborhood. But you don't see her eating, I don't think, the whole movie.
No, sometimes you'll see her with a plate on her lap, but she barely touches it.
Right. Well, I want to ask, kind of piggybacking on her as a force of nature. I'm always curious with documentarians. Did you go in with a sort of script or narrative in mind, or did you kind of let Tamar's rhythm dictate the narrative that you used in the documentary?
Yeah, it's the latter. I let her rhythm dictate because, again, I saw what I was doing as documenting her life. So I am on her agenda. And I'm trying to enter her world, and my intention is not to alter her world, but it's just to show her world. So whatever she was doing, that's what we did. And again, you learn the rhythms pretty quickly as to how the day is going to go. So the first few days I had no idea what it would look like. But then after a while, it was clearer to me that, the cameraman and I would show up at, something like 10:30 to Tamar's apartment or Tamar's house. And we would film her a little bit at home. Maybe she would talk for 2 hours. Maybe she would talk while watching TV. We would just basically hang out with her until she was ready to go to the block. And she would go early in the afternoon to the block, arrive, set up, and then hang out until about 8 o'clock at night. So we settled into that rhythm relatively quickly. And that's sort of how every day went. And what was going to happen in any given day, you really didn't know. Again, Tamar, because she doesn't sleep, she some days you'll show up in the morning and she will have been up all night thinking about what she wants to do, and that's what you're going to do that next day. And everything plays out exactly the way that she has envisioned it from the night before, which is also astounding.
Yeah.
So she comes up with these epiphanies overnight, and she's like, okay, and this is what we're going to do tomorrow. And that's what happens.
And in terms of plans and things going the way you hope they will, it occurred to me that the routines of how we all live daily life have been just pretty much exploded by the pandemic. So I'm curious how the life of your film has been affected by that.
Oh, that's a painful question. Well, we had premiered the film at the end of January in New York at the New York Jewish Film Festival, and we had started scheduling other screenings at other festivals and then at one-off special screenings. So we were building a nice schedule for the film, which for the most part has been completely blown up. So thankfully, a festival like the Cleveland International Film Festival has decided to offer streaming, which is fantastic as far as I'm concerned. So the film will have a life on the festival circuit, albeit a truncated one. And at the same time, what it means is that we need to sort of crunch down the time frame before we try to get distribution for it. And that's what I'm working on now, is trying to find a distributor who is interested in the film.
It's definitely a life and just slices of it that should be seen. I was so inspired by Tamar and the pull of what she's doing and how necessary it is today. I'm curious, on a lighter note, how you've been spending time during the shelter at home kind of thing. A lot of binging going on?
Like I said, I live in New York, and we're sort of at the epicenter of the pandemic. So we've been inside for a while, but I need to get out of my apartment at least twice a day.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go out in the morning and I'll walk for like an hour or so. And I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. And, in the beginning, I was trying to get as much information as I could about what's going on. But after a little while, I decided I don't need any more information. And it doesn't help me to hear the latest statistics or the latest ridiculousness coming out of the daily press conferences. So I'm trying to focus on anything other than this. And one of the podcasts that I've been listening to is something called The Rewatchables, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
like the Bill Simmons podcast,
Yeah.
where he and a couple other of his guys talk about films that they've seen over and over again, and they generally tend to be, pop culture heavy comedies. So that's kind of what I've been binging on lately. I've also been watching on HBO The Plot Against America, based on the Philip Roth book that came out probably 10
Oh,
years ago, or maybe a little bit more, which is frightening because you realize that what seemed so far-fetched when he wrote it now doesn't seem so far-fetched anymore.
Yeah.
But as much as one can enjoy something like that, I've been enjoying it. And then the other thing that I've been binging on, the Yankees have their own TV network here, and obviously there's no baseball season, so all they can do is show what they call Yankees classics, which are
oh.
games,
Oh, nice.
historical games where they've played well. And the Yankees have never lost on Yankees classics. So
I like
it's
that
really,
reality.
it's like Pravda, right? We create our own truth.
Right.
Well,
Excellent.
I got to say thank you for creating They Ain't Ready for Me,
Oh,
Brad.
it's my pleasure.
Really,
Absolutely.
yeah. And once again, we've been talking with Brad Rothschild, who's the director of They Ain't Ready for Me. I'm Dee Perry, and my co-host Aaron Spears.
That's me. We will talk to you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to CIFF Speaks.